Coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios, this is Prime News on SABC 3. Here are the top stories this evening.
It took the head of state to go to White House to sit down with President Trump and to put the record straight for the first time face to face.
SA political parties react to President Ramaphosa's visit to the US. France has pledged support for South Africa following President Ramaphosa's meeting with US President Donald Trump. The fuel levy increase announced by Finance Minister during the budget is being rejected in some quarters. Good evening and a warm welcome to Prime News on 3. I am your host, Mbalula, here to guide you through the stories that are shaping our world this evening. Let's take a closer look.
People are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do.
These are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death. Horrible death.
We have a rural safety problem in South Africa. I don't think anyone wants to candy coat that. And it requires a lot of effort to get on top of it. It's going to require more policing resources. It's going to require a different strategy to be able to deal with it.
The crime is terrible, sir, but Mr. Steenhuisen won't admit to it, but he runs the Western Cape, where I live. And the biggest murder rate is in the Cape Flats.
You're taking people's land away
we have not.
from them. And those people, in many cases, are being executed. They're being executed. And they happen to be white, and most of them happen to be farmers.
What an action-packed day indeed at the Oval Office yesterday. Now tonight we dissect the legitimacy and substance of South Africa's delegation during the meeting between President Ramaphosa and Donald Trump, which occurred at the Oval Office in Washington, D.C. last night. At the epicenter of what was to be a trade and bilateral discussion was the alleged white Afrikaner genocide in the country. We saw emotions run high, but the question remains, did the delegation's composition and their actions align with the country's interests and priorities? To help us unpack this is Dr. Oscar van Eeden, Research Associate at the UJ Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership. Good evening to you, Oscar, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Becky.
Now let's dive right into it. How do you assess the value and substance of South Africa's delegation to the Trump meeting?
Look, I think that we can all agree that because when you have things in your arsenal, then you take them out. There was this claim, and I think that Ramaphosa and the delegation knew that somehow the white genocide matter is going to come up. So we took 4 white males with us. Firstly, the Minister of Agriculture, because there's a claim of farm killings, a white male, also the leader of the official opposition, and part of Ramaphosa's government. I think that in itself speaks volumes. Then you had 2 very successful sportsmen, golfers, that is saying that they are very comfortable in South Africa, that they live in South Africa, and that they are plowing back in terms of building houses and so forth for their families. And then, of course, you have Johan Rupert, who is the wealthiest South African man, white, very privileged, represents privilege, and again, standing shoulder to shoulder with his black president, Ramaphosa, here in the Oval Office to not only show support, but also to set the record straight in terms of the fact that what we have is not a race problem, but a crime problem. So I think that was the optics. And of course, we had the ministers. I think it's very unfortunate that President Ramaphosa didn't call on them to also say a few words. I'm sure that the Minister of State Security, as well as Lamola, we know how eloquent Minister Parks Tau can be. I think they would have added some flavor to the statistics and so forth. So it's very unfortunate they didn't speak. But I do think any mature journalist that was standing in the room would have been able to pick up those subtleties as to why 4 white males were brought, Afrikaners for that matter, was brought as part of the delegation.
And did the composition and their actions align with the country's interests and their priorities?
Look, I think that I was slightly disappointed with Minister Steenhuisen. I think he knew, and everyone knew, the main reason why he's part of the delegation is when that issue of white genocide comes up, we wanted to hear the words come from his mouth, which he has said before in public. And this was an opportunity in the Oval Office, in front of international media, to say categorically, there is no white genocide. Unfortunately, for some or other reason, he chose not to say those words, but he did clarify the Julius Malema and the Zuma matter, and the fact that the GNU is wanting to keep those kinds of populist leaders out of government. So I think he said some valuable things, of course, but the main messaging, unfortunately, he fell short to actually stipulate that.
Now, what role did politics play in their selection, and was it appropriate, and why was Mcebisi Jonas left out of this delegation?
I'm made to understand that Mcebisi Jonas was stuck in London and for some reason couldn't make the way to Washington, D.C. I think it would have been an important value add, considering that he is our envoy, who is supposed to be smoothing matters over. I think that between Minister Parks Tau, Trade and Industry and Competition, and Minister Steenhuisen, they've informed us with the press conference after the circus of the 40 minutes in the Oval Office, that they've made some strides in terms of agreements. There's been some commitments from both sides. I think now we can safely say that the door is open. It would be very difficult for Trump to shut the door yet again. And so now that it's open, it's the beginning of resetting that relationship.
Now, it is said that certain members of the delegation were included at Trump's request. Is it common practice that a host country dictates the formation of a visiting country's delegation, or is that an overreach?
It is an overreach, but we're dealing with Trump. You know, Becky, we have this. A good friend of mine reminded me of a Turkish proverb that says, when you take a clown into a palace, it doesn't mean the clown becomes the king. What it means is the palace becomes a circus. And that is what we saw last night. Dim the lights, let's see a movie, and let's try and ambush the South African delegation. It completely backfired. Everyone saw it for what it was. I think this is going to be a low point on Trump's legacy amongst many other low points. It just didn't do, it never got its intended outcome. I think that President Ramaphosa addressed the matter with poise, with dignity. He was composed. He kept his composure. He sternly said, no, it's not true. We are a constitutional democracy. Trump even lied, in saying that if anyone in America should say that he wants to kill this one or that one, that person will be arrested immediately. It is simply not true. America is also a constitutional democracy, freedom of speech. There's the Fifth Amendment, there's the First Amendment, and so on. So, I think that what is important here is that Trump wanted to close the chapter that has been choreographed since February, since he took office and signed the executive order, making all kinds of falsehoods and untruths and lies about South Africa. And last night he concluded it. I'm sure he thinks on a high. Unfortunately, the world doesn't.
Now, Dr. Van Eeren, how big a moment in South African history was this event?
It was a very historical moment because since the dawn of democracy in South Africa, all U.S. administrations have always taken South Africa serious. There's a story that says that President Clinton in the early 90s asked the State Department, give me a list of 10 countries which I cannot ignore. And South Africa was on the list. And every subsequent administration in the United States has taken South Africa serious until Donald Trump arrived and wanted to now create a rift, wanted to blacken the name of the moral authority of South Africa by claiming that there's genocide happening in South Africa against white Afrikaners. I think the whole thing was choreographed. We had to get the 49 so-called refugees in America before Trump invited Ramaphosa to come, and then the coup de grace, according to Trump and his ilk, was to say, dim the lights and let's watch a movie. It was pathetic, it's cheap diplomacy, and as I say, everyone saw it for what it was. The operative word in all international media around the world was ambush.
Thank you so much. It seems that's all we have time for on this topic. Thank you for your insightful analysis tonight, Dr. Van Heerden. It was indeed a pleasure chatting to you.
Always a pleasure, Becky.
Meanwhile, the ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula characterized the high-stakes meeting, mission accomplished, a reminder that this meeting came after months of mounting tension between the two countries following claims by the US of a white genocide and land grabs.
Following a tense few months, Wednesday's meeting marked a turning point for South African-US relations. Speaking to the SABC, ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula was in high spirits, saying the meeting was a success.
Many things have been said about South Africa. It took the head of state to go to White House to sit down with President Trump and to put the record straight for the first time face to face, and President must be applauded for that.
However, not everyone shared his sentiments.
We are going to continue to chant kill the poor, kill the farmer. We are going to continue to pursue constitutional and legislative mechanisms to expropriate the land without compensation. And we're going to backtrack on that, whether Donald Trump is calling for the arrest of Julius Malema or not.
What you have there sitting next to Donald Trump is a fugitive from justice. What should be happening is that they should be prosecuting him and letting him and asking him to actually respond as to how was he found with all those dollars in his couch.
I am Zara Groenewald in Johannesburg.
That is not government policy.
Welcome back. Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, Dr. Joel Maswanga, has warned against what he calls promoting government based on populism. This, as the fuel levy increase announced by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana during the budget speech in Parliament on Wednesday, is being rejected in some quarters.
We should not promote a situation where we don't want the public and the corporates to pay taxes. It will not be right that every time the state talks about increasing a tax, we encourage protest. You are not going to run a state based on populism.
Subject to the amendments that Parliament has to make as part of the appropriations process and so on, the parties in the GNU will support the budget, ultimately. So it will pass. We will not have this scenario where the budget doesn't pass. I hope Mr. Moloto doesn't kill me for straying out, but I felt this is important to say because we'll get to a point where if we are irresponsible, then we'll get to a point where people are not going to get paid their salaries. And I don't think we should get there.
We are going to make sure that whatever the next engagement we have with any international investor or domestic investor in future, the story South Africa has to tell is that ultimately we are reviewing our expenditure to make sure it's aligned to priorities. We have a plan that is fundable. We hold the executive to account against that plan. And if there's a figure that we should all obsess about going into the medium term, is whether the rate of investment, both domestically, internationally, the gross capital formation, is that number going up or down?
France has reportedly pledged support for South Africa following President Ramaphosa's meeting with US President Donald Trump. This comes as French President Emmanuel Macron has held a working lunch with Deputy President Paul Mashatile, where the two discussed energy security and broader France-South African relations.
In response to the showdown between South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and his US counterpart Donald Trump in the Oval Office, according to members of the South African delegation here in France, French President Emmanuel Macron has promised his full support for President Ramaphosa as well as for South Africa more generally, according to a member of South Africa's delegation speaking to me at the conclusion of a working lunch between the French President and South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile behind me here at the Elysee Paris in the French capital. He said that it was a strong statement from the French President. When it comes to what that support could look like from France going forward, well, the South African delegation tells me that this could be in the form of the ongoing financial support promised by AFD, the development agency here in France, of course, coming in the wake of those deep and severe cuts to financial aid, development aid from US entities over recent months.
Struggle veteran Gertrude Chophe has passed away in her home in Gauteng at the age of 99. Chophe joined the ANC at age 29 and joined her husband Mark Chophe in exile in 1966. Chophe, who was the former president of the ANC Women's League, led the ANC Women's section in exile. The ANC remembers her as playing a pivotal role in shaping the political direction of their movement and the emancipation of women in South Africa. Upon completing the process to audit all Gauteng provincial departments by the Auditor General's office, action will be taken against senior Gauteng officials who recently failed their lifestyle audits. This follows a report by the Gauteng Ethics Advisory Council.
A damning report by the Gauteng Ethics Advisory Council revealed how head of departments and senior executives within the Gauteng provincial departments were living opulent lifestyles that were inconsistent with their salaries. Gauteng Premier says they will monitor the implementation of that report.
Gauteng has now started the process to vet all SCM staff. Anyone that is managing our contracts, as I'm speaking to you now, they're going through their lifestyle audits as well and their financial disclosures. It's a first in the province, but also a first across the country, where a province is taking all its managers through this process, purely because we really believe in good governance as a provincial government.
Lesufi also expressed gratitude for the work done by President Cyril Ramaphosa and his team in Washington, D.C. of resetting relations with Donald Trump's administration.
Remember, we'll be hard hit as Gauteng. The motor industry is in Gauteng, and it's our major economic activity. And we're worried that this relationship between South Africa and the US was starting to really harm various sectors of our society.
He also suggested that the Gauteng government precinct be reinstituted as part of a public-private partnership. This after the Gauteng provincial government recently came under fire for reportedly spending 34 million rand per month on rentals. Offenses Timo, SABC News, Midrand.
A memorial service has been held for the late former Springbok rugby player Cornell Hendris at the Boerland Rugby Stadium in Wellington, Western Cape. Hendris died last week, aged 37, after suffering a heart attack.
Former teammates and friends paid tribute to Hendris during the memorial service. The rugby community in the Boerland and the community of Wellington are in mourning following his death. He has been described as a very caring and humble person.
He didn't let fame go to his head. He was humble and down to earth, and he never forgot his roots or where he came from. He always gave with an open hand.
The Boerland Rugby Union also paid tribute to Hendris.
So we are here to celebrate the life of Cornell Hendris, a true friend, a husband, a dad, and an unbelievable teammate. I had the privilege to coach Cornell during a part of his very successful career. As Quentin mentioned, the first time I met him was at the Cheetahs. He became a Springbok when he played for us there, and he was always destined To be successful,
the funeral service for Hendris will be held in Wellington on Sunday. Corbin August, SABC News, Wellington in the Boland.
The cold has brought a chill to our region. Let's see how long it will last. Our weather team has the details coming up next.
Very good evening to you. Let's take a look at all your weather details. A cold but clear night in store for the Northern Cape, southwards in towards the Western Cape. Partly cloudy skies through the Garden Route, stretching eastwards in towards the Eastern Cape and northwards towards KwaZulu-Natal. Isolated showers possible along the coastline. Otherwise, a clear but cold evening in store for the Free State, Northwest Province and Gauteng. Ahead towards Friday's forecast, we're seeing a lot of sunshine in the forecast, but temperatures expected to be stubbornly low through the Free State northwards in towards Gauteng and Limpopo. Along the east coast, lots of sunshine expected. Be on the lookout for fog patches in the morning southwards in towards the Western Cape as well. Otherwise, cold but clear tomorrow in towards the Northern Cape. The Cape Town expecting low temperatures as well. Be on the lookout for damaging winds this evening that could produce damaging waves along the south coast of the country on towards the east coast throughout KwaZulu-Natal. And ahead towards the overnight temperatures, we're expecting a low of 0 degrees this evening in Johannesburg. Pretoria down to 4, whilst Richards Bay dips to 13 degrees. East London down to 14 overnight. Cape Town 11. A cold 3 degrees overnight expected for Sutherland. Beaufort West at 8. Kimberley down to -1 overnight. Warming up tomorrow to a maximum of 20 degrees under the afternoon sunshine. Johannesburg the same. 23 is expected along our northern border in Musina and Lephalale, Mahikeng up to about 20 degrees through the afternoon. Low 20s for Durban, getting slightly warmer as you head northwards up the coastline towards Richards Bay at 24. Gqeberha up to 20 degrees. George up to 19. And Cape Town up to 23 on Friday afternoon. That's it from me. Enjoy your evening ahead.
That's all for tonight's broadcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more news and updates. Until then, from myself and the team, stay informed, inspired, and ahead of the curve. Good night.